Priscilla, Riley, Harper and Finley.
I'm 70 years old. My name is Jerry Schilling, and I'm about to break 47 years of silence. Not because I want the attention, not because I'm writing a book or cashing in on a name that's been profitable for everyone except the people who actually loved the man behind it. I'm breaking my silence because Lisa Marie Presley died in January 2023, and she died still fighting. Fighting for answers, fighting for control of her own inheritance, fighting to understand why she, Elvis Presley's only child, had to spend her entire adult life battling for what her father left her. She was 54 years old, and she never got justice. That's when something cracked open inside me, because Lisa Marie's death meant there was nobody left. Nobody who could challenge the official story from a position of absolute authority. Nobody who could stand up and say, "I was there, I saw it, and that's not what happened." Nobody except me. I need you to understand who I am before I tell you what I know. I'm not a bitter ex-employee with an axe to grind. I'm not a family member fighting over scraps of an estate. I'm not some hanger-on trying to get 15 minutes of fame half a century too late. I met Elvis Presley when I was 12 years old. He was 19 playing touch football in a Memphis park, and he invited me into the game. That afternoon changed my entire life. From that day forward, I was part of Elvis's world, not as a fan screaming from the outside, not as someone on the payroll who clocked in and out. I was there as a friend, as family. I was there for the boring Tuesday afternoons and the legendary Saturday nights. I was there when he married Priscilla. I was there when Lisa Marie was born. I was there through the movie years, the Vegas years, the comeback specials. I was there on August 16th, 1977, when I got the phone call that Elvis was dead. And I was one of the last people to see him alive. But here's what makes my story different from every other person who's ever claimed to know Elvis. I had a life outside of his orbit. I managed the Beach Boys. I worked in Hollywood. I built a career that didn't depend on staying attached to Elvis Presley's name. I didn't need his money. I didn't need his relevance. I didn't need to ride his coattails into my own fame. So when I stayed silent for 47 years, it wasn't because I had something to hide. It was because I genuinely believed, that eventually someone with actual authority would look at what happened to Elvis's estate, to his family, to his daughter, and say, "Wait a minute, this isn't right." I was wrong. Vernon Presley died in 1979, 2 years after Elvis. He died without ever fully understanding what had been done to his son's estate, what was being done to his granddaughter's inheritance. Mini-Me died in 1980. Delta died in 1993. All the people who raised Elvis, who knew him before he became Elvis Presley, the icon, they're gone. They died without ever getting to tell their side of the story. And then there's Lisa Marie. Lisa Marie spent decades fighting. Decades trying to untangle a web of financial decisions that had been made in her name, but without her real consent. Decades trying to understand why accessing her own father's legacy required lawyers and court battles and endless negotiations with people who were supposed to be protecting her interests. She fought until the day she died, and she lost. That's when the weight of staying quiet became unbearable. Because I realized something. The only people still alive from this story are the ones who benefited from the lies. The ones who spent decades building careers and fortunes on a foundation of half-truths and convenient omissions. The ones who turned Elvis's death into their own personal gold rush, while the people who actually loved him were drowning in grief. I stayed silent for Lisa Marie. I thought if I kept my mouth shut, if I didn't add fuel to the fire, maybe she'd eventually win her battles. Maybe she'd get control of what was rightfully hers. Maybe she'd finally get to tell her story without me complicating things. But she didn't win, she died fighting. And now her daughter, Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, is trying to publish Lisa Marie's memoir. The book where Lisa Marie finally told the truth about what it was like to be Elvis Presley's daughter while watching someone else control Elvis Presley's legacy. I've read portions of what Lisa Marie wrote, and it confirms everything I witnessed, everything I knew, everything I've been carrying like a stone in my chest for 47 years. So this is my promise, to you, to Elvis, to Lisa Marie's memory. I'm going to tell you what I saw with my own eyes, what I heard with my own ears, what I know to be true because I was standing in the room when it happened. This isn't speculation. This isn't gossip. This isn't some conspiracy theory cooked up by someone on the outside looking in. This is testimony. This is the difference between what the world has been told and what actually happened. I'm going to tell you about the decisions that were made in the hours and days after Elvis died, while his family was too shattered to think straight, too destroyed to ask the right questions. I'm going to tell you about the money that was really there, about the lies that were told to justify taking it, about what Elvis actually wanted for his daughter, for his family, for his legacy. And I'm going to tell you about who made sure none of those wishes came true. I'm 70 years old. I won't be here forever, but the truth I'm about to tell you, that's going to outlast all of us. August 16th, 1977, 2:47 in the afternoon, I get the phone call. Elvis is dead. I need you to understand what that moment felt like. Not just the shock, everyone felt that. The entire world felt that, but the specific, suffocating horror of knowing that the person who'd been the center of gravity for so many lives was just gone, and the instant knowledge that everything was about to fall apart. I drove to Graceland immediately. By the time I got there, the mansion was already filling with people, family members arriving in waves, friends who'd gotten the news and just started driving. And Vernon Presley was in his bedroom, and the sound coming from that room was something I hope you never have to hear. A father's grief, raw and total and absolutely shattering. It wasn't crying. It was something deeper than that, something animal. Lisa Marie was 9 years old. She'd just lost her daddy. She was wandering through the house in this daze, trying to understand why all these people were crying, why everyone kept hugging her, why her grandfather was making those sounds. 9 years old. And in 72 hours, her entire life was going to be reorganized around her, and she wouldn't even know it was happening. Priscilla arrived that evening. She'd been divorced from Elvis for 4 years by then. She'd moved on new relationship, new life in California, new identity separate from being Mrs. Elvis Presley. But the moment she walked through those doors at Graceland, something shifted. I saw it. I was standing right there. She didn't arrive as a grieving ex-wife. She arrived as someone who'd already decided what came next. Now, before you think I'm being unfair, I understand that everyone processes grief differently. I understand that some people handle trauma by going into action mode, by organizing, by taking charge because it's easier than drowning in the feelings. I've seen that response before, but this was different. This wasn't someone trying to survive their grief by staying busy. This was strategy. Within hours, and I mean hours, not days, Priscilla had positioned herself at the center of every conversation that mattered. Who was handling the funeral arrangements? Priscilla needed to be consulted. Who was dealing with the press? Priscilla would coordinate. Who was making decisions about the estate, about Elvis's assets, about what happened next? Well, naturally, Priscilla had thoughts about that too. And here's the thing that made my stomach turn even then, even in the fog of my own grief. Vernon was in no condition to make decisions. The man had just lost his son, his only child, his whole world. He couldn't string sentences together. He'd start talking and then just stop, stare at nothing. You'd have to say his name 3 or 4 times before he'd even register that you were speaking to him. But documents were being put in front of him anyway. I remember this moment specifically. It was probably 24 hours after Elvis died. I walked into the dining room and Priscilla was sitting at the table with Vernon and some lawyers I'd never seen before. They had papers spread out everywhere. Legal documents, estate papers. And they were explaining something to Vernon about executor roles, about protecting the estate, about what needed to be signed right away to secure everything Elvis built. Vernon was nodding, but his eyes were completely empty. He wasn't processing a single word. He was just going through motions because people who seemed to know what they were doing were telling him he needed to. I asked what was being signed. I asked what these documents were. Priscilla smiled, and I'll never forget this smile because it wasn't warm, it wasn't comforting. It was patient in the way you're patient with someone who doesn't understand that the adults are handling things. And she said they were just making sure all the legal necessities were covered, making sure the estate was protected, making sure Lisa Marie's inheritance was secure. All the right words, all the soothing, reasonable phrases that sound responsible and caring. But I'd worked with Elvis on business matters. I knew what his estate planning looked like. I knew what he'd set up. And what was being described to Vernon in that moment didn't match what Elvis had told me he wanted. When I tried to ask more questions, I was redirected, gently but firmly. This was family business, legal business, already being handled by the proper authorities. Don't worry, Jerry, everything's under control. That phrase, everything's under control, I heard it a dozen times in those first 72 hours. And every single time I heard it, more decisions were being made. More papers were being signed. More of Elvis's extended family was being quietly shuffled out of important conversations. By the second day, there was a clear structure forming. Priscilla was speaking to the lawyers. Priscilla was coordinating with the banks. Priscilla was deciding what information got shared with the family and what didn't. And anyone who asked too many questions was pulled aside and told, kindly, always kindly, that this wasn't the time, that we all needed to focus on getting through the funeral, that the business details would get sorted out later once everyone wasn't so emotional. Except the business details were getting sorted out right then, in those exact moments when everyone was too emotional to fight back. I watched family members, aunts, uncles, cousins who'd been part of Elvis's daily life for decades try to be involved in decisions, try to have a say in what happened to his belongings, to Graceland, to his legacy. And I watched them get frozen out, not dramatically, not with shouting or confrontation, but with bureaucracy, with "we'll have to check with the lawyers about that," with "let's table that discussion for now," with the slow, methodical construction of walls between the people who loved Elvis and any real authority over what happened next. By August 18th, the day of Elvis's funeral, Vernon had signed documents making Priscilla co-executor of the estate, along with him and the National Bank of Commerce. On paper, it looked reasonable. The ex-wife who understood the entertainment industry, the father who knew Elvis's wishes, the financial institution that could provide stability and expertise. But in practice, Vernon was dying. Literally, his health was failing fast. The bank was a bureaucratic entity that would defer to whoever seemed most competent and organized. And Priscilla was both of those things. She had answers. She had plans. She had already positioned herself as the person who knew what needed to happen. The power structure had shifted completely. In 72 hours, while everyone else was drowning in the worst grief of their lives, the entire future of Elvis's estate had been reorganized around one person. And that person wasn't Elvis's father, wasn't Elvis's family, wasn't even Elvis's daughter. It was the ex-wife who'd left him 4 years earlier. Here's the lie that made everything else possible. The lie that justified every decision for the next 4 decades. The lie that's been repeated so many times it became accepted fact. Elvis Presley died broke. The estate was drowning in debt. Without immediate intervention, there would have been nothing left for Lisa Marie. Graceland would have been sold. The legacy would have disappeared into bankruptcy court. That's the story. That's what you've been told 1,000 times. That's what justified every single move Priscilla made from 1977 until the day Lisa Marie died. And it's complete garbage. I need to be very clear about something. I wasn't just Elvis's friend. I worked for him. I managed aspects of his business. I was in meetings about his finances. I saw contracts. I knew what money was coming in and where it was going. And when Elvis died in August of 1977, he was not broke. Was he liquid? No. Did he spend money like it was going out of style? Absolutely. Did he have debt? Yes, like most people who own multiple properties and support extended family and maintain a certain lifestyle. But broke, bankrupt, on the edge of financial collapse. No. Let me give you some numbers. The official estate valuation after Elvis died came in at about $5 million. After taxes and debts were paid, it got whittled down to around $1 million for Lisa Marie's inheritance. And that became the foundation of the entire narrative. Look how little was left, look how dire things were, look how much needed to be saved. But here's what that valuation conveniently didn't include: Elvis's ongoing revenue streams. His music catalog was generating royalty income every single month. His merchandising deals were active and profitable. Concert footage and recordings had ongoing value that would only increase. And Graceland itself, the property, the land, the contents, all of that was valued conservatively, very conservatively, for estate tax purposes. Elvis had just completed a tour 2 months before he died. June of 1977. He was still selling out arenas, still generating massive income. The touring operation died with Elvis, sure, but the demand for his music, his image, his brand, that was about to explode, not disappear. I remember having a conversation with Elvis maybe 6 months before he died. We were talking about his finances. He knew he spent too much, he even joked about it, and he told me he'd been working with advisors to set things up so Lisa Marie would be taken care of. He had investments. He had insurance policies. He had assets that were specifically earmarked for her future. So where did all of that go? Here's where it gets ugly. In those first months after Elvis died, there was an inventory done of his belongings. His cars, and Elvis had a collection worth hundreds of thousands of dollars even back then. His jewelry, custom pieces, many of them with significant gold and diamond content. His stage costumes, his personal items, his memorabilia collection, all of it got cataloged and valued. And who controlled that inventory? Who decided what was part of the estate and what wasn't? Who determined the value of these items? The executors, which meant Priscilla had her hands all over it. I watched items disappear, not physically vanish. I'm not saying there was a heist happening in the night, but I watched things get categorized in ways that benefited certain narratives. I watched valuations come in lower than what I knew items were actually worth. I watched pieces of Elvis's collection get separated out, moved around, repositioned in ways that were explained as estate management, but felt like something else entirely. Because here's what you need to understand. The real money wasn't in what Elvis had sitting in the bank when he died. The real money was in what his name would generate moving forward, and Priscilla understood that immediately. She understood that Elvis Presley the person had died, but Elvis Presley the brand was just getting started. The debt crisis that justified opening Graceland to public tour? Let me tell you about that debt. Yes, there were expenses. Yes, maintaining Graceland cost money, but the estate also had income, ongoing, substantial income from royalties and licensing deals. The math didn't require turning Elvis's home into a tourist attraction. That was a choice, a business decision, one that happened to give Priscilla enormous control over the physical space that represented Elvis's entire legacy. And the management fees. Oh, the management fees, because here's what most people don't understand about estate executors: they get paid. It's not volunteer work. It's not done out of the goodness of anyone's heart. And when an estate is generating millions of dollars a year, those management fees add up. Over years, over decades. Priscilla was compensated handsomely for her role in managing the estate. But beyond the direct compensation, there was the access, the authority, the ability to build her own career, her own businesses, her own relevance off of being the keeper of Elvis's flame. How do you put a price tag on that? How do you calculate what it's worth to be Priscilla Presley, the woman everyone has to go through to get anything Elvis-related approved, to have final say over his image, his music, his brand for 40+ years? You can't, because it's priceless. I have documentation. I have personal notes from conversations with Elvis about his estate planning. I have photographs of items from his collection with his handwritten notes about who he wanted them to go to. I have receipts and records from deals that were in place when he died. Records that show the estate wasn't in crisis, it was in transition. And here's the part that makes me angry even now, all these years later. Lisa Marie grew up being told that she should be grateful that her mother saved her inheritance, grateful that Graceland wasn't sold off to pay debts, grateful that there was anything left at all. But what Lisa Marie should have had, what Elvis wanted her to have, wasn't a trust fund managed by someone else. It wasn't an inheritance with strings attached. It wasn't a legacy controlled by people who profited from keeping her at arm's length from her own father's empire. What Elvis wanted Lisa Marie to have was her father's legacy, intact and protected, held for her until she was old enough to decide what to do with it herself. Instead, she got a managed trust that she spent decades trying to untangle. She got an inheritance she had to fight to access. She got told over and over that the decisions being made were for her benefit while watching someone else profit from her father's name. Elvis didn't die broke. His estate didn't need saving. What it needed was honest management by people who put Lisa Marie's interests above their own. That's not what it got. There's a conversation I had with Elvis that I've replayed in my mind 10,000 times. It was early 1977, maybe February or March. We were at Graceland, just the two of us, late at night. Elvis couldn't sleep. That was happening more and more by then, and he started talking about what would happen after he was gone. He didn't think he was dying. This wasn't some premonition or dark prophecy, but Elvis had watched his mother die young. He was only 23 when Gladys passed. He understood mortality in a way most people our age didn't, and he wanted certain things understood. He told me, "Jerry, if something happens to me, I need you to make sure my family is taken care of. Not just Lisa Marie, I know she'll be fine financially. But Daddy, Grandma, the cousins, the people who were there before any of this happened. They don't have anything except what I can give them. Promise me they won't be forgotten. I promised him, I gave him my word, and I watched that promise get broken in slow motion. Elvis's vision for his family was simple. He wanted Vernon comfortable and secure for the rest of his life. He wanted Mini-Me taken care of. He wanted the extended family, the aunts and uncles and cousins who'd been part of his world since childhood, to have access and support. Not as employees on a payroll, not as charity cases grateful for handouts, as family, because that's what they were. And Graceland, Elvis never, not once, mentioned wanting it to become a museum. He never talked about strangers walking through his home, paying admission to see where he ate breakfast or slept or spent Christmas with his daughter. He talked about it as home, as the place where Lisa Marie would always have roots, where family could always gather, where the people he loved could feel like they belonged. He specifically told me he didn't want his life turned into a spectacle. He'd spent 20 years being Elvis Presley the icon, Elvis Presley the commodity, Elvis Presley the thing that people consumed and analyzed and picked apart. He wanted some part of his existence to remain private, sacred, human. Every single one of those wishes was violated. Vernon died in June of 1979, 2 years after Elvis, and in those 2 years he watched the family structure disintegrate. He watched Graceland start transforming from home into business. He watched decisions being made that he couldn't fully understand or control. He died confused about what had happened to his son's estate, unclear about who was really in charge, uncertain about whether he'd protected Lisa Marie the way Elvis had wanted. Mini-Me lived until 1980, but her final years were spent watching her family get systematically edged out of decision-making, watching Graceland become something foreign and strange, watching strangers gain more authority over Elvis's legacy than the people who'd raised him, who'd known him before he was famous, who'd loved him when he was just a kid from Tupelo. The extended family, the ones Elvis explicitly told me he wanted taken care of, they got phased out, not all at once. Not with dramatic confrontations or legal battles, but through the slow, methodical process of professionalization. As Graceland became a business, family became a liability. Their presence complicated the narrative. Their memories didn't always align with the brand. Their needs didn't fit into corporate structure, so they were quietly, politely moved to the margins, forgotten. And Lisa Marie. God, Lisa Marie. Elvis's entire purpose in building wealth was to give his daughter security and freedom. He wanted her to have choices. He wanted her protected from the pressures and manipulations he'd faced his entire career. He wanted her to inherit not just money, but agency, control over her own life and her own connection to him. Instead, she inherited a trust fund she couldn't access without permission, a legacy she couldn't control without battles, a father's memory that was managed, curated, and monetized by someone else. She spent her entire adult life fighting for what should have been freely given to her, fighting to understand finances that were supposedly set up for her benefit, fighting to have basic authority over her own inheritance. Elvis would have been devastated, absolutely devastated, to know that his daughter, his baby girl, spent decades battling the very structures that were supposedly designed to protect her, that the people he loved got pushed aside while someone who divorced him got to define his entire legacy for 40 years. I have recordings, conversations with Elvis where he talked about his wishes, where he discussed his hopes for Lisa Marie, his concerns about the future, his specific instructions about taking care of family, where he spoke in his own voice, his own words about what mattered to him. I've held on to these tapes for 47 years because I didn't know what else to do with them. I didn't know if releasing them would help or hurt. I didn't know if anyone would even care. And I kept thinking, kept hopping, that eventually the system would correct itself. That justice would come without me having to be the one to force it. But it didn't, and now Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, Lisa Marie's daughter, is trying to untangle this entire mess, trying to understand what really happened to her grandfather's estate, trying to honor her mother's memory while dealing with the same forces, the same structures, the same people that Lisa Marie fought against her whole life. Riley deserves to know what Elvis actually wanted. She deserves to hear his voice, his words, his wishes in his own language, not filtered through other people's interpretations, not sanitized for brand protection, not edited to fit a narrative. So I'm releasing the recordings. Not for money, not for attention, not for revenge. But because the truth doesn't protect itself, someone has to speak it. Someone has to stand up and say, this is what really happened. This is what he really wanted, and this is how badly it was all betrayed. And I'm the last one left who can. Jerry Schilling is 70 years old, and the recordings he's held for 47 years are about to change everything. This isn't speculation. This isn't gossip. This is Elvis's voice, his actual wishes, betrayed by the people who claim to protect him. Subscribe, because what comes next will shatter the lies that built an empire on his grave. The reckoning starts now. The truth gets its turn.